So I've decided to do a video on what it's like to purchase and own an old cable excavator. A lot of people ask me, email me, they're interested in owning one of these old machines and if I'm interested in selling or what advice I would have or where they think they could find one. And I'd like to explain to you a little bit about what it's like to find one and some of the repairs that I had to make to mine. So I'm shooting this with my Sony Cyber cam instead of the GoPro because this has a viewfinder on it. Picture quality not quite as good, but I can see a little better what it is I'm recording. So when I purchased this machine 2011, I had already purchased my 22B and this was available, and the owner said if I didn't buy this and the counterpart machine that came with it, the 37 shovel, we're going to the scrapyard. So I purchased these machines. They were about 600 miles away. The cost of shipping was about equal to the purchase price. The 37 I've since sold. It did not run. This machine did run and operate, but that was just barely. And so I got a list here, some of the things I've done, starting with when I got it, it did not have a battery in it, and it has a 6-volt system. So I did purchase a 6-volt battery, and that was, it's been 8 years now. That battery has since quit, and when I replaced it with an 8-volt battery. This battery quit, and I have since refurbished the battery. It seems to be holding a charge pretty well. So I had to put a new battery in it right away, put some new battery cables on it so I could start it up. When I started it up, the first big problem was that the main clutch, the one that is controlled by this outside lever here that is attached to the end of the motor, would not disengage. And I'll give you a quick look at that clutch. There's the clutch on the end of the motor right there. And they had taken the little plate off and they had greased it heavily through the fittings there, and it wouldn't engage. So when you press the starter button, all the machinery you see in front of you would start turning right away. Now the biggest problem with that is that in order to raise and lower the boom, you have to be able to disengage that clutch, which could not be done, and the boom was off of the machine. So the first thing I had to do was trace what was wrong. And underneath the machine here, it's probably pretty hard to see. There we go. That bell crank right there, which is the push rods for the main clutch, was froze up. And I had to beat that with a sledgehammer in order to break it loose. So as soon as that was done, you know, you could disengage a clutch, and when you start the motor, there wasn't so much strain on the starter and turning all the machinery inside the machine. It had the crane boom on it with the dragline bucket right before I bought it. And one of the things was that when they removed the boom, which is secured right there at the top, you could see where the end of the cable goes in on the right. Instead of driving that wedge out, they just cut the cable, and the cable was already too short. You couldn't have the boom lying on the ground and reeve it up and get it to reach. So I had to use the 22B, of course, to lift the front of the boom up so I could get that cable on. So I went out and I purchased a new cable, and even though that's a pretty small diameter cable for the boom hoist, they're pretty expensive. So I got the crane boom on, I got the dragline bucket hooked up, and I was able to maneuver it around a little bit and do some digging with it. But one of the big problems was that the machine would not steer, and there were a couple things that had to be done in order to get the machine to steer.